If I had to build a budget workstation build with all brand new components on the mid-range price-wise, I would do exactly this. So welcome back to ImWateringPSUs, and here we are today with a PC which of course can get you to game 1080p with decent performance, but is specifically made for those of you with more professional needs. So if you need to use Photoshop or to have a very strong CPU in your computer, this is how I would do it. Now, of course, with that introduction, the CPU could only be the Core Ultra 7 265KF. Now, you may want the K, not the KF, in case you guys need the integrated graphics for acceleration purposes, for example, in Premiere Pro. But in this case, it wasn't needed, so we saved quite a bit of money by going with the F, because sometimes they are a lot cheaper for no reason. Few words on that. Intel is so much better than Ryzen for productivity, especially on the mid-range, because Intel CPUs have gotten a lot faster. I made a lot of videos about this, so if you're new to the channel, maybe check them out, but I don't want to spend too much time talking about the improvements, but we are talking about a 20% compared to launch, free improvement, and they are now a lot cheaper. So you can buy a Core Ultra 7 265K for pretty much around what I would pay for a 9700X, surprisingly. And this is a CPU which has a lot more cores, with an architecture which is more oriented towards productivity, while also maxing out for gaming the GPU we're using. Trick with Intel is to not overspend on your motherboard. You could actually get a locked chipset like a B860, no problem. Any LGA 1851 motherboard is going to be fine. And that's exactly what we've done here today, getting a Gigabyte B860 Eagle, because you can get your XMP going, no problem. You could also tweak your CPU fine. You could do the undervolts I do on the channel just fine on this motherboard, and it has more than enough power phases for a simple Core Ultra 7 running at stock or slightly tweaked. So there's no need to spend more on it. Where we also saved money is on the RAM. Now, currently it's a tricky period for RAM, but if you're watching this in the future, it's not going to be any different. Basically, if you're getting very high-speed RAM, you usually need to get a better motherboard, or you also need to get a bit lucky with your CPU. If you get a mid-range chip around 6000 MHz, which is the most popular one due to how Ryzen works, and so they're making chips which are good for Intel and Ryzen too, with good timings, you're going to pay a lot less and also be happy. So this is why we've gotten here these Patriot Venom DDR5, which are some 6000 MHz RAM. I show you guys the CPU-Z info about it. You just enable the XMP or the XPO anywhere, and they just work off the get-go. We also went with a 2TB, still from Patriot Viper VP4300, which is a very good drive, coming in at a very good price. For just over $100, you have 2TB running at over 7000 megabytes per second. Now, you know I love the Kingston MV3, but this is slightly faster, so if the price is close, and if you're doing productivity, so you care about the actual speed, I think it's worth it to spend a little bit more on it. Of course, if you do need a Gen 5 for your workload, go for it, but in this case, it wasn't really needed, and 7000 megabytes per second is still quite a lot. Moving around files, exporting projects is still very fast, so no need to get anything different. What you are going to need, though, is a very good cooler. Now, LGA 1851 Arrow Lake is not the previous gen. It's not an i9 1400K overheating everywhere. But if you do get a bit of thermal headroom, you're going to be able to run your system tweaked a little bit, which means you're going to have a quieter system overall and just more performance in general. So I've gone with Antec for this build, for the case and for the water cooler. Now, the case we'll cover later, but the water cooler is the Antec Skeleton 360, and it's a drive that comes in cheap, really cheap. Antec generally has always been a pretty value brand, so you're not overpaying for it. Little negative is you do have to assemble the fans yourself. That does save a bit in terms of cost to the company, so I understand. And if you're mounting your only one on the front, of course, it's going to be more useful than if it were pre-mounted. I understand. But the fans have proprietary connectors, which I also don't love too much, but those are the only two negatives, because the fans are really good. It is very quiet, and the install process is super easy, and the water block itself is something different, because it's actually made of an interesting shape, and it's not just design. It is RGB, but if you're going for a more premium look for your build, you can always turn that off or put white LEDs, as we'll discuss later, seeing that the case has a little wood panel on it. But the thing is, it's a very good performer. As you can see in the benchmarks, in Prime 95, it literally didn't even reach 80 degrees, which is very good with stock fan curve. Now, onto the case, which is the actual cool part of the build. I went with the Antec Flux Rear, and to call a case Flux from Antec, it means it has to be a good case, because the Flux Pro was probably my favorite standard case released in 2024. Flux Rear comes in with 3 included RGB fans, even though the back fan you have to mount yourself, and they are 140s, so pretty big fans, as well as 2 fans going from intake on the bottom. Now, the cooling configuration in this case is fascinating, because from the outside, it may just look like a regular black case with a little very thin wood panel, which by the way, being so thin, I think works better because it doesn't force you to go for like a wooden looking build. It's just a little accent, so it can blend with the RGB, but also with white LEDs, or just look a bit more elegant if the case was turned off. But from the outside, the wood aside, it just looks like a very nice full of mesh case. But from the inside, it's very, very different. So the airflow configuration is strange. We basically have two intakes on the front, two intakes on the bottom where usually the power supply is, but the cases that do that doesn't really work because the power supply is under there. So what they've done here is they have relocated the PSU to the front with a cable. So you take off this little mesh panel here and you access the power supply. There's a cable that relocates, of course, the power output to the back. The only negative is if you have to turn on and off your PSU from the switch, you have to do it from here, which means you have to take this off and also the front glass panel. But it actually makes cable management a lot easier. I actually like this design. I didn't think I would. And it basically automatically cable manages itself. Now, you may encounter issues with cable lengths. At least I thought I would, but the case is compact, so they must have studied it so that you don't. And literally, the cables, you just slot them in with the straps you have inside the case, and they are pre-managed. So it takes 5 minutes to build in it. For the power supply, I've gone with a very simple Deepcool PN750D PSU. It's an 80 plus gold non-modular PSU, which, since I also needed a SATA cable for this build, it just is easier to build with, since we have a lot of space for cables. Wasn't a problem whatsoever. Now, if I had to critique this build or this case, I would say there's a lack of dust filters. So it's very mesh, there's going to be airflow coming in from everywhere, and there aren't many dust filters. So it's going to require a little bit more maintenance to keep it clean, but the airflow is insane. Now, keep in mind, for this build, we're using a simple RTX 5060 from MSI. It's an entry-level GPU, not something I would recommend, but something we got just because we had to fit into a budget, and the guy didn't really use his GPU too much, just a little bit. But even though we have a low-power GPU, check out these temperatures, okay? Check out the Firestrike score. First of all, we got a little world record there, but it's mostly because nobody uses Firestrike anymore. But temperatures are so low. And that's because the case does push quite a bit of air while staying very quiet. Now, I'll also just play a little gameplay of Apex Legends to show you that, yes, you can also game on it. We're actually doing close to 300 FPS all the time, so it's a decent game PC for 1080p. But I want to hear what you guys think. Do you like this as a little sample of Workstation build at around the $1,000 mark, or would you have liked something different? As usual, if you guys have any input, please drop it down below, because very often I use that to plan my new videos. And so we can also help each other. Also, if you're still watching, maybe drop a like and subscribe. And see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.